Hey guys, tonight we're going to float gently into the mysterious, intricate, and sometimes baffling world of the Mayans. You know, that ancient civilization famous for giant stone cities, a calendar that supposedly predicted the end of the world. Spoiler, it didn't. And a penchant for building enormous pyramids in the middle of jungles that are otherwise very inconvenient for modern visitors. So, dim the lights, maybe grab a cup of tea, and let's meander through their world at a pace that's slow, calm, and slightly sarcastic. The Maya civilization flourished for over 2,000 years across parts of what we now call Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, and El Salvador. They weren't a single empire, mind you. They were more like a collection of city-states that sometimes traded, sometimes fought, and occasionally decided to randomly vanish. It's one of those things historians like to call classic Mesoamerican intrigue. Mayan cities were architectural marvels. Think steep pyramids, stone temples, and palaces decorated with elaborate carvings. Some of these cities, like Tikal or Palenque, rose above the jungle canopy, which is impressive because the jungle, as always, tried very hard to reclaim its territory. The Maya carved their monuments in limestone, organized plazas for ceremonies, and built ball courts because apparently sport and ritual often go hand in hand. You can imagine kings in feathered headdresses and priests in elaborate costumes presiding over games that were sometimes violent, but hey, cultural diversity. They also had a sophisticated writing system, which is to say, they were excellent at leaving complicated inscriptions all over stone surfaces that take modern scholars decades to fully decipher. Their hieroglyphs recorded everything from royal lineages to rituals, wars, and astronomical observations. Yes, astronomy, because the Mayans were quietly excellent at tracking celestial movements, eclipses, and planetary cycles. They could predict solar events with precision that would make modern enthusiasts of space apps nod in appreciation. And speaking of calendars, the Maya developed multiple overlapping systems, including the famous long count, which cycles roughly every 5,125 years. This is the calendar that got sensationalized in modern times as predicting the end of the world in 2012. It didn't, obviously. The Maya were just very good at timekeeping. Their calendars synchronized agricultural cycles, religious festivals, and ceremonial events, which is impressive because coordinating anything in the jungle city without smartphones is, well, it's impressive. Religion was central to Maya life. The cosmos mattered, gods mattered, and humans mattered, especially when humans were making offerings. Rituals included feasts, dances, bloodletting, and the occasional human sacrifice, usually carried out with extreme solemnity and ritualistic decorum. Kings often acted as intermediaries between humans and gods, which sounds like a stressful job if you ask me. They also commissioned enormous temples and stelae to commemorate victories or important dates, because nothing says devotion like carving your triumph into stone for future generations to puzzle over. The Maya economy was equally intricate. They cultivated maize, beans, squash, and cacao, which could be traded as currency. Markets, trade networks, and tribute systems connected city-states across the region. Trade goods ranged from jade and obsidian to salt and feathers, often carried over long distances. And yes, cacao was apparently a big deal. Some historians suggest they drank chocolate, sometimes spiced or bitter, during ceremonies. So if you think your morning coffee ritual is ancient, you might be slightly off. So from architecture to astronomy, writing to ritual, the Maya civilization was both highly sophisticated and occasionally mysterious. Their achievements endure in stone, glyphs, and cultural memory, while their occasional disappearances, city abandonments, and unexplained collapses give modern historians just enough to write countless hours of slow, careful narrative. Now that we've set the stage with temples, calendars, and cacao beans, Let's gently wade into the slightly more personal side of Mayan civilization, the kings, dynasties, and political drama. Because while the stone cities and glyphs look calm and eternal, the people who ruled them were often embroiled in the usual human business of ambition, rivalry, and the occasional spectacular failure. Maya rulers were often called Kuhul Ahau, holy lords. And yes, the holy part was emphasized. Kings weren't just political leaders, they were intermediaries with the gods. Their blood, their rituals, and their presence were believed to keep cosmic order intact. No pressure, right? Imagine being told that if you didn't perform your ritual on schedule, the sun might stop rising. Talk about job stress. Each Maya city-state was its own kingdom, complete with rulers, nobles, scribes, artisans, farmers, and warriors. Places like Tikal, Calakmul, Copan, and Palenque became major centers of power. And while they shared cultural traditions, they were rarely one big happy family. More often, they competed, fought, and tried to one-up each other in displays of power. Think of it as an ancient version of neighborhood rivalries, except instead of arguing about property lines, they built massive pyramids and launched military campaigns. Dynasties mattered a lot. Rulers claimed divine lineage, connecting themselves to ancestors, gods, or legendary founders. Genealogies were carved into stelae, and marriages were carefully arranged to cement alliances between city-states. And when alliances failed, as they often did, wars broke out, complete with captured kings, public humiliation rituals, and occasional sacrifices. If you were unlucky enough to be on the losing ends of a dynastic feud, your legacy might be quite literally erased from stone carvings by your victorious rival. Historical delete buttons, Maya style. One of the most famous rivalries was between Tikal and Calakmul. These two powerful city-states spent centuries locked in a cycle of warfare, alliances, and betrayals. Each tried to dominate the Maya lowlands, and each left behind monuments boasting of victories, and conveniently omitting defeats. If you read enough inscriptions, you'll notice a recurring theme. Everyone thought they were winning, even when they weren't. Kings also performed elaborate rituals to maintain legitimacy. Bloodletting, yes, the intentional offering of their own blood, was common. Kings and queens pierced tongues, ears, or other body parts, offering drops to the gods as a demonstration of devotion and cosmic responsibility. Painful, yes. Effective as a political performance, also yes. Nothing says, I'm committed to my job, like literally bleeding for it. Queens sometimes played significant roles too. Royal women could serve as powerful regents, political negotiators, or religious figures. Inscriptions occasionally highlight queens who acted as co-rulers or who stepped in during succession crises. Their presence and rituals reinforced dynastic continuity and the sacred nature of rulership. So, while the kings got the titles, the queens often ensured the dynasty actually survived. Court life wasn't all rituals and politics, though. Nobles enjoyed lavish feasts, adorned themselves with jade, shells, and feathered headdresses, and employed artisans to create murals, pottery, and jewelry. Status was displayed in dress, diet, and ceremony. And as in most human societies, nobles probably found creative ways to make life more complicated than necessary, while commoners did most of the actual farming and building. But the heart of it all was dynastic drama. City-states rose and fell, kings proclaimed victories, enemies were captured, and monuments were built to ensure everyone knew who was in charge, until the next ruler came along and tried to overwrite the story. Through it all, the Maya kings and queens embodied both the grandeur and fragility of their civilization, magnificent in ritual and architecture, yet deeply human in their rivalries and insecurities. So, while the pyramids of Tikal or the temples of Palenque might look serene today, Remember that they were once the backdrop for generations of dynastic struggles, political theater, and cosmic responsibility. Quiet stone hides noisy human ambition, and in that sense, the Maya kings were not so different from leaders anywhere else, except maybe with better headpieces. Now that we've floated through kings and dynasties, let's glide down to ground level, where most Mayans actually lived their lives. Because for all the monumental pyramids and elaborate rituals, the day-to-day reality was much less glamorous and honestly, much more relatable. First, the basics. The backbone of Mayan life was maize. Corn wasn't just a crop, it was life itself. Their mythology even described humans as being created from maize dough, which is one way of saying if you don't respect corn, you're not really Mayan. Maize was ground into masa to make tortillas, tamales, and a variety of dishes that remain staples in Mesoamerica today. Beans, squash, and chili peppers rounded out the diet. Occasionally, they added turkey, deer, or fish for protein, but maize was always the star of the plate. Farming was constant and demanding. Fields were often cleared using slash and burn techniques, which sounds aggressive, but it was effective in the short term. Families tended plots of maize, beans, and vegetables, working with stone tools and simple irrigation systems. The work was hard, hot, and muddy. But without it, the entire civilization, kings, scribes, temples, and rituals wouldn't function. So while kings carved their names into stone, farmers carved furrows into soil, each equally essential in different ways. Homes were modest. Most commoners lived in simple huts made from wood, thatch, and mud plaster. These houses were grouped into family compounds, often with a shared courtyard for cooking, weaving, and socializing. Life was communal, centered around kinship and shared labor. Contrast that with the palaces of the nobility, which were stone-built, multi-roomed, and decorated with murals. The difference between elite and commoner housing was, shall we say, very noticeable. Clothing also reflected status. Commoners wore cotton or woven fiber garments, often dyed or decorated in simple ways. Nobles, of course, took it to the next level with embroidered textiles, jade ornaments, and feathers. Lots of feathers. If you had access to quetzal feathers, you were really showing off, since the birds themselves were rare and prized. Nothing says prestige quite like a hat that requires someone else to climb a tree and annoy a tropical bird. Artisans played an important role in everyday life, too. Skilled potters, weavers, and stone carvers produced everything from cooking pots to ritual masks. Many of their creations were decorated with glyphs or scenes from mythology. These artisans weren't necessarily common in the sense of status. They often worked closely with elites, supplying luxury goods and ceremonial objects. In a sense, they were the influencers of their day, creating culture one carved vessel at a time. Markets were lively centers of activity. People traded not only food, but also salt, tools, textiles, and ornaments. Cacao beans often served as currency, which raises the delightful possibility of a society where your chocolate stash was also your wallet. Imagine paying for groceries by handing over a handful of cocoa nibs. It sounds fun until you realize you might accidentally snack on your savings. Family and community life revolved around rituals, both small and large. Household shrines were common, with offerings made to ancestors or local deities. Births, marriages, and deaths were all marked by ceremonies, reinforcing connections between the living and the spiritual world. Children were expected to contribute early, helping in fields, learning crafts, or assisting with household tasks. Education wasn't universal. Scribes and nobles received specialized training in reading glyphs or astronomy, while most people learned practical skills from family. Work was balanced with celebration. Festivals were frequent, tied to the agricultural cycle and religious calendar. These events combined music, dance, food, and ritual, bringing communities together. Of course, some of the rituals also included bloodletting or sacrifice, but for most participants, the emphasis was probably on feasting, dancing, and community, rather than existential cosmic maintenance. And then there were the ball games. The famous Maya ball court wasn't just for kings and nobles, it was a cultural phenomenon. Players tried to keep a heavy rubber ball in play using hips, elbows, and knees, occasionally with life or death stakes depending on the occasion. For everyday people, though, ball games could be local events, watched for entertainment as much as ritual meaning. The courts doubled as social spaces, blending leisure and ceremony in one convenient stone-built arena. So, while kings' temples rose into the jungle canopy and kings proclaimed cosmic legitimacy, the majority of Maya people lived lives shaped by maize fields, family compounds, bustling markets, and community festivals. Their contributions were less likely to be carved into limestone, but without them, the civilization would have collapsed long before any calendar cycle could roll over. The everyday Mayan life wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, communal, and deeply tied to the rhythms of land, sky, and tradition. It's a reminder that civilizations aren't built by kings alone. They're built by countless ordinary people who farm, cook, weave, trade, and, occasionally, play ball with surprisingly heavy rubber. Now that we've spent some time in the markets and maize fields, let's tilt our heads upward, or maybe downward, into the Mayan spiritual world. Because if there's one thing the Maya were consistent about, it was that everything in life had a spiritual dimension. The sky, the earth, the underworld, the crops, the ball game, yes, even the ball game, were all woven into a cosmic tapestry so elaborate that it makes modern astrology look like a hobby. The Maya worldview was structured around three layers: the heavens above, the earth in the middle, and the underworld, or Xibalba, below. This wasn't just a symbolic framework, it was a lived reality, reinforced in architecture, rituals, and daily practice. Temples were literally built to connect heaven and earth, rising toward the gods while doubling as stairways for kings to perform their sacred duties. Meanwhile, caves and cenotes, those sinkholes filled with water, were understood as gateways to the underworld. Picture a society where a swimming hole wasn't just a place to cool off, but also an entrance to a realm of death and gods. That'll make you think twice about a quick dip. The Maya pantheon of gods was crowded, complex, and, honestly, slightly exhausting. There were creator gods, maize gods, rain gods, death gods, and a whole collection of deities tied to planets, animals, and natural forces. Some of them had multiple forms, depending on the occasion. For example, the rain god Shak could appear as one figure or four, depending on the direction of the wind and rain. Because why settle for one when you can have a team? The maize god was especially central. Since maize was life itself, the deity who embodied its growth and renewal was celebrated in rituals, myths, and art. The death and rebirth of maize mirrored human life cycles, agricultural patterns, and cosmic order. In other words, growing corn wasn't just farming, it was reenacting divine drama every single season. No pressure, farmers. Religion was also deeply tied to astronomy. The Maya observed the movements of Venus, the moon, and the sun with remarkable precision. Celestial cycles weren't just interesting, they were essential for deciding when to plant, when to wage war, and when to hold ceremonies. Priests used codices and elaborate calculations to predict eclipses, align temples, and coordinate festivals. Imagine a world where your political strategy depends on whether Venus is in the right part of the sky, because for the Maya, it did. Rituals were the glue that held the cosmos together. And yes, bloodletting was one of the big ones. Kings and queens drew blood from tongues, ears, or other tender places, offering it as a way to nourish the gods and keep cosmic balance. Pain was part of the symbolism. The offering was personal, intimate, and significant. It wasn't just about keeping the gods happy, it was about proving legitimacy, devotion, and connection to the divine. For commoners, rituals were smaller: food offerings, incense burning, or participation in communal ceremonies. Still important, still part of the cosmic bargain. Sacrifice did happen, including human sacrifice, though it wasn't as constant as sensationalized versions suggest. Victims were often prisoners of war, chosen individuals, or even volunteers for particularly sacred occasions. These sacrifices were solemn affairs, intended to maintain order and ensure that the sun rose, the rains came, and life continued. To the Maya, it wasn't cruelty, it was necessity, woven into their understanding of existence. From a modern perspective, of course, it's unsettling, but in their worldview, it was the ultimate form of devotion. Architecture reinforced cosmology at every turn. Temples were aligned with solstices and equinoxes, stairways, plazas, and pyramids often reflected celestial patterns. Even the ball courts carried symbolic weight. The dame itself reenacted the struggle between life and death, order and chaos, human and divine. So when players bounced a heavy rubber ball with their hips, they weren't just playing a sport, they were participating in cosmic theater. In myths, particularly those recorded in the Popol Vuh, the Maya depicted gods and heroes descending into Xibalba, the underworld, facing trials, dying, and being reborn. These stories reflected cycles of maze, celestial movements, and human destiny. The world was never static. It was a constant interplay of death, renewal, sacrifice, and cosmic maintenance. So the Maya world wasn't just temples and kings, markets and fields. It was an interconnected system of belief where everything had meaning, every action carried spiritual weight, and every life participated in cosmic balance. To them, bloodletting wasn't strange, nor were elaborate calendars or star-watching priests. It was simply how you kept the world functioning. And while we, centuries later, might raise our eyebrows at some of these practices, the Mayan devotion to their cosmology was absolute. They lived within a universe where the gods weren't distant. They were immediate, insistent, and deeply involved in the daily rhythm of planting, feasting, ruling, and dying. So far, we've wandered through kings, farms, and the cosmos. Now let's drift into one of the most fascinating and at times frustrating parts of Maya civilization: their writing, their art, and their intellectual pursuits. Because the Maya didn't just build pyramids and offer blood to the gods. They also wrote, painted, carved, and calculated with a level of sophistication that quietly humbles anyone who still struggles with basic math. Let's start with the writing system. Maya hieroglyphs are among the most complex and beautiful script ever devised. They combined logograms, symbols that represent words, with syllabic signs, so they could write just about anything: names, dates, events, even snarky commentary about their rivals. Glyphs were carved into stone monuments, painted on ceramics, written in codices, and even inscribed on bones or shells. If you had something important to say, chances are someone was chiseling it into limestone. The challenge for modern scholars has been figuring it all out. For centuries, Europeans misinterpreted Maya writing, thinking it was purely symbolic rather than phonetic. Decipherment really took off in the 20th century, and today we can read much of what the Maya wrote. What do the inscriptions tell us? Mostly dynastic boasts, ritual records, and astronomical notes. Imagine if the only surviving records of your society were government press releases, calendars, and astrological forecasts. That's roughly the situation. Still, the glyphs are mesmerizing. They're artistic in themselves, curved, elaborate, often anthropomorphic. A single glyph block could contain multiple layers of meaning, making the writing system as much art as communication. If you've ever doodled in the margins of a notebook, picture the Maya doing the same, except their doodles predicted eclipses and legitimized kings. Speaking of art, Maya creativity was everywhere. Murals decorated palace walls depicting gods, rituals, dancers, and everyday scenes. Pottery carried painted or incised imagery, sometimes with glyph captions, like ancient comic strips with a very serious tone. Stone carvings adorned stelae, altars, and lintels, filled with both imagery and text. Even small objects, jewelry, figurines, shells, were decorated with fine details. Nothing was too ordinary to be turned into an artistic surface. And then there were the codices. These were folding books made from bark paper coated with lime, filled with painted glyphs and illustrations. They recorded astronomy, rituals, calendars, and divination guides. Tragically, most codices were destroyed during the Spanish conquest, burned as works of the devil. Today, only 4 survive: the Dresden, Madrid, Paris, and Grolier codices. Imagine an entire library, carefully crafted over centuries, reduced to ash because someone thought it looked suspiciously unchristian. It's one of history's quieter cultural tragedies. But let's not get too bleak. The surviving codices revealed just how advanced Maya intellectual life was. They tracked Venus cycles, lunar eclipses, and solar phenomena with remarkable precision. Some of their astronomical calculations rivaled or exceeded those of contemporary civilizations elsewhere in the world. And they didn't do it with telescopes. They did it with careful, patient observation recorded across generations. If nothing else, it's a reminder of what you can achieve if you look up at the sky often enough and take really, really good notes. Mathematics was another strength. The Maya developed a vigesimal, or base 20 number system, which makes sense if you're counting on fingers and toes. They invented the concept of zero independently, a feat that not many civilizations managed. Their dot and bar notation made calculations efficient, and it tied neatly into their calendar systems. When you're juggling multiple overlapping cycles of days, years, and cosmic ages, you need math that works, and theirs worked beautifully. Art and intellectual life weren't separate from religion or politics. They were deeply connected. A beautifully carved monument wasn't just decoration. It was a statement of legitimacy, devotion, and cosmic alignment. A codex wasn't just a book. It was a sacred tool for divination and timekeeping. The Maya didn't draw hard lines between science, art, and spirituality. For them, it was all part of the same cosmic order. So while their kings boasted on stelae and their priests calculated Venus's movements, artisans and scribes made sure that every piece of information was wrapped in beauty. Writing was art was history, and history was cosmology. The result is a civilization that, even after centuries of abandonment and conquest, still speaks through its glyphs, murals, and codices, quietly, intricately, and persistently. It's almost ironic that a civilization once dismissed as mysterious or primitive turns out to have left behind such a detailed, sophisticated record of itself. The real mystery, perhaps, is how long it took the rest of the world to notice.
Now that we've meandered through cultural and literary significance, let's drift into the world of innovation, accessibility, and the quiet technological changes that have shaped U.S. mailboxes over the last few decades. Because even something as seemingly mundane as a blue box is subject to gradual evolution. First, accessibility. Beginning in the late 20th century, postal authorities realized that a one-size-fits-all design didn't quite serve everyone. Mailboxes needed to accommodate people of varying heights, individuals with disabilities, and the occasional curious child. Designers experimented with slot heights, lock mechanisms, and spacing around the boxes to ensure universal access. The changes were subtle. No one was radically redesigning the blue box, but they quietly improved usability while maintaining the familiar aesthetic. Then there's durability. Industrial coatings and powder paints, developed for weather resistance and corrosion prevention, became standard. Boxes could survive longer, retain their vivid blue, and withstand decades of use with minimal maintenance. From snowy winters in Minnesota to humid summers in Florida, the blue mailbox quietly endured, a testament to engineering patience and the slow evolution of industrial materials. Some experimentation even touched shape and ergonomics. While the iconic rounded-topped rectangular design persisted, engineers tested wider slots for larger parcels, more secure locking mechanisms, and slightly lighter materials to facilitate installation and maintenance. Feedback came from postal carriers, city planners, and the occasional curious citizen. Iterations were small, almost imperceptible, but cumulatively significant. The mailbox evolved subtly while retaining its iconic silhouette and color. Technology also crept in quiet ways. Sensors to detect fullness, tracking devices for maintenance schedules, and automated collection notifications slowly entered the postal ecosystem. While most people will never notice, these upgrades improved efficiency and reliability. The blue mailbox remained outwardly familiar, a comforting constant on the street, while quietly benefiting from behind-the-scenes modernization. Even minor color tweaks occurred. Over time, paint formulations changed for better UV resistance, longer life, and reduced fading. The official postal blue remained consistent in tone, but subtly brighter or more resilient, ensuring that the box remained visually distinct in urban and suburban landscapes. Human eyes rarely notice, but the difference matters to postal workers, manufacturers, and city planners who rely on visibility for safety and convenience. The mailbox also quietly responded to societal changes. Increased parcel volume from mail order shopping prompted experiments with larger boxes, parcel lockers, and clustered units to handle modern needs. Even in the age of email, the blue box adapted to remain relevant, supporting physical communication in a society increasingly dominated by the digital. In these decades, innovation didn't mean drastic change. It meant subtle adaptation, more durable materials, ergonomic refinements, accessibility considerations, and technological support. Through all these slow, patient updates, the mailbox retained its calm, authoritative, unmistakable blue presence. It continued to function quietly as a public service symbol, a cultural icon, and a witness to everyday life. Ultimately, this period shows us that even objects we consider mundane are quietly dynamic. The blue mailbox wasn't frozen in time. It evolved gradually, carefully, and almost invisibly, maintaining its familiar presence while subtly adjusting to new societal, technological, and environmental realities.
Now that we've gently navigated the technological and ergonomic evolution of mailboxes, let's float into the world of human interaction. The subtle, sometimes odd ways people interact with these blue boxes. Because despite being standard, reliable, and quietly authoritative, mailboxes have inspired countless small stories and quirks. First, lost letters. Every postal carrier has stories about letters that mysteriously disappear, whether they slipped through the slot improperly, got stuck in a bag, or were simply misdelivered. Residents sometimes blame the box, unaware that it's perfectly functional. The mailbox, of course, doesn't mind. It stands silently, dutifully,
continuing to hold thousands of other letters without complaint, quietly enduring human frustration. Then there are creative community uses. Some neighborhoods decorate boxes for holidays, modest bows at Christmas, subtle pumpkin motifs at Halloween. Occasionally, a blue mailbox appears in a local art project or photo series, framed as a symbol of communication, history, or Americana. Despite the odd decoration or minor artistic modification, the box remains instantly recognizable, asserting its calming authority while tolerating small human eccentricities. Lost or forgotten items occasionally enter the story. Keys, small notes, even coins sometimes find their way into mailboxes. People often check them out of curiosity or desperation. The mailbox, again, remains silent and stoic, performing its job with the same quiet efficiency regardless of human idiosyncrasies. Postal blue also appears in human ritual. Children drop letters to Santa into specially designated boxes. Lovers might leave small notes tucked inside, as if the mailbox itself were a confidant. Occasionally, local communities hold letter drives or charity campaigns where pennies, stamps, and envelopes collect in clusters of blue. The mailbox serves as an unobtrusive facilitator of small-scale human connection, quietly participating in life's rituals without ceremony or applause. Then there's public curiosity. Tourists sometimes photograph the boxes, particularly in historical districts. Writers, photographers, and YouTubers may feature them as emblematic of Americana. Even in a digital age, the physical, blue mailbox continues to hold symbolic weight, a visual signal that communication, tangible and deliberate, still exists in a world dominated by pixels and notifications. Quirky urban legends also emerge. A box in a particular city might be rumored to never overflow or to disappear mysteriously and reappear. Some boxes are unofficially adorned with stickers, graffiti, or small tokens, which may vanish mysteriously over time. The mailbox, calm and blue, remains, impervious to rumor, graffiti, or legend, quietly collecting letters and occasionally attention without acknowledging either. Finally, the mailbox teaches patience. Letters don't move instantly. The act of depositing mail involves waiting, trusting a system, and performing a small, deliberate action. In a culture increasingly obsessed with instant gratification, this tiny blue object silently reinforces the value of waiting, of trust, and of small, deliberate human acts. In all these subtle stories, the blue mailbox proves more than a functional object. It participates in life, observes human quirks, tolerates mistakes, and supports traditions, quietly, reliably, and in a calming shade of blue. It is mundane and extraordinary simultaneously, ordinary in appearance, yet quietly central to innumerable small human experiences.
Now, let's float gently into the more peculiar side of mailbox history. Those odd, sometimes amusing, occasionally frustrating incidents that remind us the blue box is more than a piece of metal. It's a witness to decades of human behavior, cultural change, and subtle societal quirks. First, unusual mail-related incidents. Over the years, postal workers have encountered everything from letters stuffed with small objects to packages left in precarious positions on top of or beside the box. Some incidents are mundane, a slightly bent envelope or a misdirected postcard. Others are more imaginative, a small jar of pickles, an oddly scented note, or even a novelty toy slipped through the slot. The mailbox, of course, tolerates all of it with quiet indifference. There are also occasional legal quirks. Mailboxes are federal property, and tampering with them is technically a crime. This has led to some interesting enforcement stories, from pranksters gluing slots shut to people trying to repurpose the box for storage. Federal authorities occasionally intervene, issuing fines or warnings. Meanwhile, the mailbox continues to stand in place, calm and blue, impervious to both the law and minor human mischief. Cultural shifts also play a role. As email, texting, and digital communication have risen, the role of physical mail and, by extension, the mailbox has changed. Letters are rare, but parcels have increased in volume, necessitating minor design tweaks and occasional larger collection boxes. The blue mailbox has silently adapted, maintaining its familiar exterior while quietly accommodating a changing function. It's a small lesson in resilience and adaptability, quietly teaching that appearances can remain constant even as roles evolve. Historical anecdotes abound as well. During wartime, especially World War II, local post offices and communities sometimes repurposed mailboxes or prioritized certain deliveries. Some boxes were temporarily relocated, painted differently due to metal shortages, or even removed to support wartime logistics. The people noticed, sometimes complained, and sometimes adapted. Through it all, the blue mailbox, or whatever variant existed, persisted as a symbol of continuity amid change. Then there's the suburban story. In the sprawling post-war suburbs, mailboxes became markers of personal property and neighborhood identity. Residents began associating specific boxes with their homes, treating them as small but meaningful extensions of property and routine. A mailbox became more than a receptacle. It became part of the rhythm of daily life, signaling neighborhood stability and civic participation. Urban legends also quietly accumulate. Stories circulate about particularly stubborn boxes that never seem to jam, or ones that always seem full just before a holiday. Others involve mysterious disappearances, odd collections, or minor local disputes over placement. Residents tell these stories as part of shared memory, and the mailbox continues to exist as the calm, blue observer, collecting letters while witnessing human idiosyncrasies. Finally, these anecdotes remind us that even a mundane object is embedded in culture, law, ritual, and personal experience. The blue mailbox is not just a utilitarian device, it is a repository of subtle historical memory, reflecting how communities interact with public infrastructure, tradition, and everyday life. It's a silent participant in countless small stories, quietly maintaining its presence in a world that rarely pauses to appreciate it.
Now, let's drift gently into the slightly more imaginative side of blue mailboxes, how they've quietly inspired education, arts, and creative experimentation. Because even something as mundane as a postal receptacle can become a small canvas for human curiosity and ingenuity. First, education. Teachers and educators have occasionally used mailboxes as tools for lessons in counting, organization, or responsibility. Children might drop letters into a classroom mailbox, mimicking the real thing, learning patience, sequencing, and cause and effect in a tactile way. Even in urban studies or history classes, the blue mailbox appears as a simple symbol of civic infrastructure, offering a quiet introduction to bureaucracy, logistics, and civic duty. The mailbox, of course, remains silent, dutifully inspiring learning without needing acknowledgement. Then there's art. Some artists incorporate mailboxes into photography, sculpture, or installations. They serve as familiar yet authoritative icons, instantly recognizable, visually striking in blue, and culturally resonant. Occasionally, entire public art projects revolve around clusters of blue boxes, sometimes painted over with temporary designs or adorned with community contributions. Even when altered or decorated, the boxes quietly maintain their identity,
demonstrating a remarkable capacity for symbolic consistency. Creative experimentation also extends to material and design. Hobbyists and local craftsmen sometimes build miniature blue mailbox replicas or experiment with alternative colors while keeping the original design intact. These small-scale experiments highlight the balance between functionality, symbolism, and aesthetic familiarity. The mailbox's consistent form allows playful deviation while preserving recognition and authority. Some communities have used blue mailboxes as focal points for local engagement. Letter drives, charity collections, and neighborhood projects often rely on the familiar visual cue of a blue box. People deposit coins, envelopes, or small items for causes ranging from school fundraisers to holiday gift collections. The mailbox quietly facilitates human generosity and collaboration, its color reinforcing consistency and trust. Even in modern digital contexts, the blue mailbox inspires playful experimentation. Photographers, vloggers, and social media creators use them as nostalgic or symbolic elements in content about communication, tradition, or Americana. They're instantly legible, culturally embedded, and visually calm. A perfect visual shorthand for messaging, continuity, or civic reliability. Interestingly, these artistic and educational experiments rarely disrupt the mailbox's primary function. Letters continue to be collected, parcels continue to be secured, and the blue hue continues to assert authority and calm. This dual role, practical utility and cultural canvas, demonstrates the subtle adaptability of a design that is both simple and resilient. Ultimately, these small experiments reveal something larger. Even the most mundane public infrastructure can inspire creativity, education, and subtle social engagement. The blue mailbox quietly supports these human endeavors, remaining visually consistent while allowing its context to shift from classroom to gallery, neighborhood drive to digital imagery. It endures in function and imagination alike, a small, steadfast participant in the ongoing story of human interaction.
Now that we've meandered through education, art, and creative experiments, let's float into the subtle technological and environmental aspects of the blue mailbox in the modern era. Because even as the world grows digital, the humble metal box quietly adapts. First, technological adaptation. While the exterior of the mailbox remains familiar, the USPS has experimented quietly with behind-the-scenes upgrades. Some boxes now include sensors that detect fullness, streamlining collection schedules. Others are monitored digitally to alert postal workers when maintenance or repairs are needed. From the outside, the box appears identical, calm, blue, authoritative. But inside, it quietly participates in a more efficient, tech-enhanced postal system. The digital age also introduced subtle shifts in mail volume and content. Letters may be rarer thanks to email, but parcels, small packages from online shopping, have increased. Some collection boxes were redesigned to accommodate larger items, while others became part of clustered parcel locker systems. The blue mailbox remains visually consistent while quietly supporting a new function in a world increasingly dominated by digital commerce. Sustainability is another quiet factor. Modern paint formulations are designed to last longer, resist corrosion, and reduce environmental impact. Materials have been optimized for longevity, reducing waste, and the need for frequent replacement. Even minor design tweaks, like lighter steel alloys or powder-coated finishes, contribute to a smaller carbon footprint over decades of use. The mailbox, calm and blue,
embodies subtle environmental responsibility without fanfare or announcement. Public perception has adapted too. While some people view mailboxes as relics, most understand their continued utility. The USPS quietly encourages responsible use, emphasizing secure deposit of letters and parcels. Educational campaigns sometimes highlight mailbox etiquette, reminding citizens that the boxes are federal property and play an essential role in communication and commerce. The mailbox, as always, stands silently, embodying consistency and trust. Interestingly, the blue mailbox also functions as a symbol of continuity amidst rapid change. In an era of instant messaging, drones, and autonomous delivery vehicles, the mailbox remains reassuringly physical. You can touch it, see it, and rely on it. Its color, a calm and authoritative blue, reinforces trust and reliability, signaling that even in a world of fleeting digital messages, some things endure. In some neighborhoods, technological and design innovations coexist. Parcel lockers, cluster boxes, and traditional curbside mailboxes all operate in harmony. The familiar blue design anchors the system visually, helping people locate collection points, trust the infrastructure, and maintain habits that have existed for generations. It's an elegant blend of old and new, unchanging form, subtle innovation. Finally, the mailbox quietly teaches a lesson about adaptation. Function remains paramount, but adaptability ensures relevance. Its persistence, paired with gentle technological improvements and environmental consideration, allows the mailbox to remain a calm, authoritative, and quietly reassuring feature of urban and suburban landscapes. It endures in a world of change, subtly reminding us that resilience often comes from small, thoughtful adaptations rather than dramatic overhauls.
Now, let's drift gently into the emotional and cultural side of the blue mailbox. How people remember, interact with, and attach subtle significance to these quiet blue sentinels. Because despite being ordinary public infrastructure, mailboxes hold a surprisingly persistent place in memory and daily life. First, nostalgia. For many, the blue mailbox represents childhood rituals, dropping letters to Santa, mailing birthday cards, or sending a note to a pen pal. The act is deliberate, tactile, and slowly paced, unlike the instant communication we're used to today. The calm, authoritative blue of the box silently reassures the sender that their message is secure and will be delivered. In a world increasingly dominated by digital immediacy, the mailbox embodies a slower, deliberate, and almost meditative form of communication. Adults, too, form subtle attachments. Students mailing college applications, friends sending postcards, or neighbors passing along small invitations all interact with the blue mailbox in quiet, meaningful ways. Even the simplest interaction, a coin dropped into a mailbox-themed fundraising drive or a local letter-writing campaign, anchors daily life with a small but enduring ritual. Communities often recognize specific mailboxes as landmarks. A box at the corner of a street may be more than a receptacle. It can signal routine, punctuality, and reliability. People develop habits around collection times and locations, coordinating schedules subtly around these ubiquitous blue icons. Even when people complain about an overflowing box or a relocated one, the interaction underscores its significance in daily life. Anecdotes also abound. Some people leave small notes or tokens tucked into boxes for strangers. Others recall finding a cherished letter, forgotten or delayed, that arrived safely thanks to a calm blue box. Occasionally, minor mysteries occur. Letters deposited at the wrong slot, packages left nearby, or a note disappearing and reappearing years later. In each case, the mailbox remains a quiet observer, absorbing human quirks without judgment or complaint. Cultural nostalgia extends into media as well. Photographs, films, and stories often feature blue mailboxes as subtle symbols of continuity, community, and Americana. The visual shorthand is instantly recognizable. Blue, authoritative, calm. Even for those who rarely mail letters, the color alone evokes trust and reliability. It's a testament to decades of careful standardization and quiet endurance. Finally, these everyday interactions and personal memories reinforce a subtle lesson. Small, ordinary objects can accumulate meaning over time. The mailbox is mundane, functional, and often overlooked, but through decades of interaction, observation, and cultural embedding, it becomes a touchstone for memory, ritual, and quiet human connection. Its persistence, both physical and symbolic, reminds us that stability and trust can exist in the simplest forms, quietly anchoring life in an ever-changing world. In this sense, the blue mailbox is more than infrastructure. It's a repository of nostalgia, a facilitator of daily routine, and a quiet witness to human behavior. It endures, calmly, faithfully, and, in its unassuming way, significantly.
Now, let's drift gently into some of the stranger corners of blue mailbox history, those small, quirky, and occasionally surprising stories that show the mailbox as more than a simple receptacle for letters. First, regional quirks. While postal blue is standardized, local conditions sometimes create subtle differences. Coastal areas may see boxes that have faded to a softer, almost grayish blue due to salt air and sun exposure. Mountain towns may feature boxes reinforced against heavy snow or wind. Urban centers often cluster boxes for efficiency, while rural areas may have solitary blue sentinels marking long stretches of road. These variations subtly reflect local geography, climate, and community needs, yet the familiar blue hue unifies them all. Then there are unusual anecdotes. Postal workers occasionally report boxes that seem lucky or unlucky to locals. One box might rarely jam, while another seems perpetually full just before holidays. Communities pass along these stories in quiet amusement. The mailbox itself remains unaffected, calmly enduring repeated collections, curious notes, and occasional human superstition. Historical oddities also occur. During emergencies, parades, or public events, mailboxes have been temporarily relocated, decorated, or even used as symbolic props. Some small towns have preserved vintage boxes as historical landmarks, painted in slightly different shades of blue to reflect their era. These preserved relics serve as reminders of the slow evolution of design, materials, and public expectation. Occasionally, the blue mailbox has appeared in unusual cultural context. Photographers may use it as a symbol of Americana. Poets or writers reference it in subtle metaphorical ways, signifying trust, communication, or waiting. And on rare occasions, local mischief finds its way to a box. Stickers, graffiti, or minor decoration attempts. In all instances, the mailbox endures, quietly performing its duties regardless of human intervention, quietly reinforcing the idea that some objects are impervious to drama. These anecdotes remind us that even the most ordinary objects accumulate subtle significance over time. Blue mailboxes quietly witness human behavior, regional variation, and cultural shifts. They endure technological changes, minor mischief, and climate stress, all while remaining visually consistent. In their calm, authoritative blue, they silently tell stories of persistence, community, and the slow evolution of public life. In these ways, the mailbox proves that mundane objects are never truly mundane. They are repositories of history, habit, and occasional human whimsy, quietly present on every street corner, still painted in that familiar, calming blue. Now, as we drift toward the end of this long and gentle exploration, let's reflect on what the blue mailbox truly represents. Beyond metal, paint, or practical utility, it is a quiet symbol of continuity, trust, and subtle human connection. It has endured wars, industrial change, technological evolution, and the rise of digital communication, all while remaining calm, authoritative, and unmistakably blue. The mailbox's legacy lies in its quiet persistence. For decades, it has been a fixture in communities, urban, suburban, and rural alike. Children grow up learning to deposit letters. Adults rely on them for communication and parcels, and neighborhoods recognize them as subtle landmarks. Even as email, instant messaging, and drone deliveries become common, the blue mailbox persists, quietly anchoring routines and expectations. Its cultural significance extends further. In literature, art, photography, and urban lore, the mailbox appears as a visual shorthand for trust, patience, and continuity. People decorate it, photograph it, write about it, and sometimes even mythologize it. Yet through all human creativity, curiosity, and occasional mischief, the mailbox remains steadfast. Its color, calm, reliable, and reassuring, has quietly embedded itself in American life. The mailbox also teaches subtle lessons. It reminds us of patience. Letters don't move instantly. They require trust in a system. It teaches resilience. The box endures weather, wear, human interference, and shifting communication habits. It demonstrates adaptability. Minor technological, ergonomic, and environmental improvements allow it to stay relevant while maintaining its familiar identity. Even its simplicity is profound. A blue box sitting at a street corner does not shout, argue, or demand attention. Yet it witnesses daily life, participates in rituals, and quietly facilitates human connection. In its calm, unobtrusive way, it demonstrates the enduring power of subtlety, consistency, and reliability. So, as you walk past a blue mailbox the next time, pause for a moment. Observe its slightly worn edges, its authoritative hue, and the fact that it has quietly endured decades of change. It has survived industrial shifts, technological revolutions, cultural transformations, and minor human mischief, all without complaint. It is small, unassuming, yet quietly monumental, a persistent witness to everyday life, history, and human interaction. In the end, the blue mailbox is more than a postal receptacle. It is a legacy of design, community, and endurance. It is a calm observer, a facilitator of connection, and a subtle cultural icon. It quietly reminds us that not all significance is loud or dramatic. Some of it comes from persistence, consistency, and the quiet fulfillment of a simple purpose. And so, the blue mailbox endures, steady, reliable, and calm, quietly painting the story of American life in a shade of trust, patience, and unassuming authority. It is the small, underlooked, and gently persistent hero of streets and neighborhoods, faithfully standing sentinel and silently reminding us that even mundane objects can quietly shape culture, memory, and everyday life.